Hey guys, Loman02, doing a 93-94 old school deck tech and then followed up by some gameplay. So, the deck you have in front of you I like to call DreamStone. It's actually a combo prison deck. The way it plays out is actually like Modern Lantern, which is kind of the inspiration for the deck itself. Field of Dreams, and yes, we've hacked the art on MTGO, says players can play with the top card of their libraries revealed, which allows you to have, you and your opponent to have a decent bit of knowledge about what each player is going to be drawing. You couple this with a card like Millstone, which, is not the most efficient way to mill, but it is the only way to really mill in old school, I guess, outside of like Chains of Mephistopheles or possibly some other weirdo cards. And what you have is a combination that allows you to control, generally speaking, what your opponent draws. So we run 4 of Field of Dreams, which is a world enchantment, legendary enchantment, essentially. It means there can only be 1 in play at a time. And then 4 Millstones with 1 copy artifact and transmute to get after that effect. So, what's the point of the deck? The point of the deck is really to control them in the early game, whittle their hand down to almost nothing by use of Disrupting Scepter, Mind Twist, and then just attrition through cards like Swords to Plowshares, etc., making a lot of their cards dead with Moat, and then outdrawing them with Jame Day Tome. And then once you get to a position where you're able to, and then we also have City in a Bottle, which can be transmuted for, and I think is good enough main deck with a transmute package, to kill the best creature threats in the format. So the way the deck works is, you're going to generally play a very long game, but once you get their hand to 0 cards and you have 1 to 2 Millstones in play in a Disrupting Scepter, it becomes pretty much impossible for them to win because you utilize Field of Dreams to give them irrelevant cards off the top of their deck and then Disrupting Scepter those cards away. That's kind of the point behind the deck. As far as the sideboard goes, we have Skullvorm to get back Field of Dreams if necessary, and or Moat. We have an Argivian Archaeologist, which if they're playing against us, they should probably remove most of the removal. If they're a burn-based deck, they can still deal with this card, and you probably don't bring it in. But Argivian Archaeologist allows you to get back your Millstones or possibly your Cities in a Bottle. We have a secondary City in a Bottle against like the Serendib and Urnum deck. Some Sinbads to bring in against like white-based decks that don't have red. So if they remove the removal, we can just put this in, utilize Field of Dreams to draw lands off the top of our deck, which is pretty strong. Circle of Protection red because this deck has a tough time dealing with burn type effects. Return to Dust against artifact decks. Blue Elemental Blast red decks. And then the Abyss. The Abyss is not main. I think it is worthy of a sideboard nod. The issue with it is it's also a world enchantment, and with Field of Dreams, you can't have both the Abyss and Field of Dreams in play at the same time. So, we'll go to the games here. Unfortunately, we lose this game, but the second game is actually fairly interesting and kind of shows the power of the deck. So, this first one, we have, I believe, a Library of Alexandria hand. This hand's not great, but it's okay. It has no white mana, which is an issue, but I think it's pretty hard to throw back a Library of Alexandria hand. We get burned turn 1, so we know we're probably against a matchup that's not going to be super great for our deck. We go ahead and Demonic Tutor here for Ancestral Recall. Unfortunately, our opponent has Time Walk, bolts us into Time Twister, which is a huge beating because now we have no blue mana and just a ton of blue cards that we can't cast. So we're in a lot of trouble here. Our opponent has Strip Mine as well. They cast out a threat, Strip Mine us. I'm pretty much obliged to Swords to Plowshares this thing. I think my opponent doesn't play around Disenchant and just attacks in, which I think is probably right here. They play on a Disrupting Scepter, which really is not going to be the biggest issue right now because I just don't have mana. Like, I'm just going to discard cards that I have duplicates of. Like, discarding a Field of Dreams is fine. It's possible we want to go down to like 3 Field of Dreams in this deck because the card is really not good in multiples. I can't even pitch it to Force of Will in this format, so it's pretty bad. Alright, we draw Transmute and then just end up conceding it because we're going to lose. We're going to take 5 next turn. My opponent has 3 cards. They don't have red mana to burn me out, but they probably have like a Psionic Blast or something. And there's really no getting out of this for us. We need to draw land and a spell. We need to draw basically a way to deal with the Serendib and the Mishra's Factory and, the ability to play a Moat. Like, there's no draws that are going to get us out of this with this deck. So game 2. So this hand's promising because it has City in a Bottle, and it has 1/2 of my combo, which is Millstone. Millstone's not great on its own, but at some point in time we do have to get it down to control the game. We also have early interaction in the form of Swords to Plowshares, and we have a Strip Mine, which is okay, and Blue Elemental Blast is fine. It's not great in this matchup, but it's fine. Like it can get rid of Shatters, it can deal with, bolts, it's okay. So we see City of Brass, which is great for us because it means we're going to be able to kill that with our City in a Bottle and then have Strip Mine for a follow-on land. So we go ahead and just do it now. He Strip Mines, which is interesting to me because it's kind of aggressive. But he has Black Lotus, so it makes sense. He goes ahead and Time Twisters again here, which is pretty savage. Draws into his Lotus again, but does nothing with it, which makes me pretty happy because, you know, if I have a way to deal with it, cool. Alright, Disenchant. We do Disenchant here. He tries to Shatter. I do actually protect this with Counterspell, which may or may not be right. The Millstone's not the most imperative, but my opponent is at 6 cards with 1 land in play and Ancestral Recall, so their draw has been pretty solid so far. We go ahead and Mind Twist them down to 4 cards. I think this is probably the most common. This play should be taken. We do end up hitting 2 lands, which is not bad. He still has a Soul Ring plus another land, which is good for him. Play Field of Dreams, see Power Sink on top. I actually don't mill Power Sink. I do mill here on him. That could be right, could be wrong. I actually don't mind hitting 1 more land, but this next land I'm actually going to mill myself on. Draw to Disrupting Scepter. I know I can't play it because he has Power Sink in hand plus 2 unknowns. We do get rid of his Disrupting Scepter, but unfortunately draw him into a Brain Geyser, which is pretty savage. So sometimes this doesn't work. Once you have 2 millstones, it generally always works. But because he tapped out for it, it's still not the worst of deals. And, like, you know, I don't mind forcing him to do that because I'm able to here resolve my Disrupting Scepter, which I think is going to allow me to control the game. We know he just has Counterspell in hand plus a bunch of random cards. Serendib on the top is good for us. Like, we don't mind if he draws that. I go ahead and Disrupting Scepter here. He discards his Library of Alexandria. Chain Lightning I'd rather him not have, so I believe I mill him this time around. Yeah, and he has Psionic Blast on top, which is also not great for us. But I'm going to allow him to have it here. Wait, no, I don't. I don't allow him to have it. But I end up getting really unlucky again, and he gets Recall. So he's hit Recall and Brain Geyser off of Blind Flips, which kind of sucks. But, you know, this is not a surefire strategy. It's a very soft lock. Maze of Ith is not bad for us. He does go ahead and Recall here for, I believe, Counterspell and Time Twister, which is pretty good. That's going to be problematic. We draw into Counterspell, which is not going to do it because we know his last card is Lightning Bolt off of his draw steps. He does discard the Lightning Bolt. Goes ahead and Time Walks here, which is fine. It's going to allow him to get another permanent off the top of his library. It's possible that I should have just waited to mill. But actually, no, it's not. Like, I actually didn't want him to get another permanent threat, so I figured it was probably right to mill because he's going to Time Twister anyways. He casts a Disrupting Scepter. I go ahead and counter that. And now to start hammering his hand with, resolve my Jameday Tome, start hammering his hand with the Disrupting Scepter. And this next turn, he's going to have the ability to burn me with this Lightning Bolt off the top deck, plus any other burn he may have, but I think I'm probably going to live through it. So take 4. Take 3, and then take 3 one more time, and he's out of cards in hand, which is exactly where I wanted to be because it's going to be very difficult for him to draw out of this now. I go ahead and hit his last card, which I believe is Volcanic. We know he's drawing Islands, so I'm going to let him, and then I'm just going to start drawing with Jameday Tome and just outcard him here. He's not attacking with his Factory. I think that's a pretty safe assumption that it's not going to work. I do go ahead and draw here, get additional land, Counterspell on top. We see Lightning Bolt on top, but I have at least 1 mill, which I will do on his end step here of his library. Now note, he has more cards in deck than we do, but I don't really care if he draws Counterspell, but I am going to Ancestral myself here and just look for more land permanents. But this is how the deck works. It's a prison deck, and eventually it gets a hard lock. Well, it doesn't get a hard lock, but it gets a fairly close, a similitude of a hard lock. Once it has multiple millstones with Field of Dreams in play, and then Disrupting Scepter and Jameday Tome, just to outcard them in both ways. So you get them Hellbent, and then just control what they draw off the top. So in a lot of ways, like the Modern Lantern deck. Unfortunately, last game, we also have Tragedy Strike. I believe my opponent, turn 1, Black Lotuses into another Time Twister, which is rough because his hand is a lot worse than my first hand was. I mean, obviously I don't have a choice to keep it or not, so, you know, I just go for it here to see if I can hit my next land. Unfortunately, we miss very handily on mana here. There's like a 3 or 4 turns where we just don't hit lands, and we kind of lose because of that. The other thing is we're playing a lot of Field of Dreams, and having 2 of them is just god-awful. Well, there's the answer to Serendib Jin, and I already have an answer to Disenchant. Luckily, my opponent has to go down on blue mana if they want to keep their factory. I do go ahead and disenchant it here. My opponent, I believe, cast a Spell Blast. So they start beating down, and I see my next land, and I'm like, well, that's my next land, but I'm dead already. So he has 2 burn spells and just activates the factory and kills us. So Time Twister, pretty much demolished us both games. This deck is obviously a little more fragile, and if you don't get to keep your, if your keep decision is not relevant, off of a Time Twister, sequence, then, you can lose very easily. But the deck is pretty cool. I don't think it's the best combo deck ever in Old School, but I wanted to give it a try because I think it's cool. I think it's an interesting idea to give it a shot. I think the best combo decks are definitely going to be probably your Channel Fireball style decks, like Power Artifact style decks, are pretty good. They can also play Power Sinks very easily if you ever do get the Basalt Monolith with Power Artifact on it. Reanimator's not bad. And then I think Land's Edge is actually very good as well, despite not having availability of blue in it. Or I guess it could, but generally it doesn't. And then this Field of Dreams deck here, another combo deck that I just kind of want to give a shout out to and just give it a try to, even though I do think it's a little bit suboptimal. But it is sweet. It's kind of a cool deck concept, and if you enjoy playing Prison and kind of blue-white control, Esper control, I guess blue-white splash black control, you probably enjoy this deck because it does require a decent bit of thought to go into it, to actually play it well, I think. And as you can see, the turn 1 Time Twisters of the world are just going to demolish this deck because it's got a lot of dead cards. It's got a couple Janebay Tomes, Disrupting Scepter, Field of Dreams, which are all invested cards or combo pieces that don't really do anything the turn they come into play, generally speaking. So I hope you guys enjoyed the quick deck tech on this DreamStone deck, this 93-94 DreamStone deck, and the gameplay. Enjoy, guys, and take care now.